Welcome, everybody, to this workshop. This workshop is brought to you by the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science. We are in the business of helping teachers teach evolution in the United States. My name is Bertha Vasquez, and I am the director of the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science. I'm also a classroom teacher. I've been teaching middle school science in Miami, Florida for the last 28 years. So what is a Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science? It is a nonprofit project of the Center for Inquiry and the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. It is a network of classroom teachers. We have 64 classroom teachers at the moment around the country presenting workshops to their fellow science teachers. It got started kind of in a simple way. As a middle school science teacher, I know that I have to cover a lot of information that I may not have studied myself in college. For example, I teach geology when I teach earth space science. I don't have a degree in geology, and you are oftentimes as a teacher 2 or 3 chapters ahead of your students, just making sure you know the content and understand the resources and the lessons before you present to your students. There's no way you can be an expert in all of the sciences, and many middle school classrooms around the country, you have to cover all of the sciences. You can't specialize in just biology or physics or chemistry like high school teachers can. I realize that many teachers at the middle school level were not life science majors in college and had never taught or learned about evolution. So I started offering workshops in my school district to my fellow middle school science teachers on evolutionary biology and sharing some good resources with them. I happened to share this story with Dr. Richard Dawkins, who's a well-known biologist in England. And he said, well, that's a great idea. How can I help? Can I come and speak to these teachers that you've been working with? I thought, wow, what a great opportunity. And he came to Miami, Florida. Many, many teachers came. And we talked evolution and natural selection. So that's how it got started. He asked me then if I would do this nationally for him, if I could organize these workshops on a national level. Well, I gave it a shot, and our first workshop happened about 4 months after Richard Dawkins came to my school on April 3rd, 2015. It was a wonderful collaboration with the Miami Museum of Science, the Frost Museum of Science. And since then, it's become quite common, and it's wonderful for TIEs to collaborate with museums, nature centers, zoos, and universities around the country. We started out in 2015 with only 10 workshops, not bad for the first year. 17 workshops in 2016. Now, 2017 was a banner year. We got that number up to 46 workshops. And 2018 was very similar. Right now, today is February 17th of 2019. We are at 12 workshops and counting. This gives us a total of 128 workshops with 64 different presenters around the country in 46 US states. Have a look at the map. This is where we are around the country and still growing. So what does TIES provide? What do the teachers get in these different workshops? First of all, we talk about the middle school science standards. We provide content. Of course, this changes from state to state, and we make modifications in our PowerPoint depending on where the workshop is being held. But this slide here gives you kind of what the middle school science standards are in a nutshell. We provide resources. I will share with you our TIES education page at the end of this workshop, and I'll show you how all of the resources are free and high quality. We must explain the word theory. I tell my students there are words in science that mean different things in the classroom or in the science world than they do outside in the world we all live in. For example, the word organic in a supermarket, well, we all know what that means. But when it comes to chemistry, we know it means talking about carbon chemistry. The same thing goes with the word theory. You can say, I have a theory that say the Miami Dolphins are going to win the Super Bowl this year. But that's not a scientific theory. That's kind of more like a hunch or a hypothesis. A scientific theory is a broad explanation for something that happens in nature, such as gravity, or the fact that the sun is the center of the solar system. So we must address this misconception and many others in our workshops. This is one of the biggest misconceptions. This picture, this ladder of progress, as you call it, that shows that man came from monkeys. We want to show our teachers and our students that this linear depiction of evolution is just not right. And I'll get back to that later. This is more right. I have a wonderful activity that we'll do together during this workshop that is going to make this very easy for students to understand. Fourth, we really stress scientific inquiry, just like the next generation science standards do. We want children to collect data and draw their own conclusions. So a lot of our labs and activities, our investigations, are focused on this type of evidence-based science inquiry. We like to focus on the current relevance of evolutionary biology, giving our teachers and hopefully their students some ideas of how evolution plays a role in modern day world. For example, Wildcam Gorongosa is a wonderful, wonderful activity that can be done with students, brought to you by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Wildcam Gorongosa shows how a park in Mozambique is being repopulated with wild animals. The park was decimated during the Civil War in the 60s. The only animal that was brought back that has so far not survived and not been successful in producing offspring and growing in population numbers is the cheetah. If you look at the cheetah as a species, it has very limited genetic diversity. So when the cheetahs were brought into this park, they just didn't have the genetic variation to survive the change in the environment. That's an example of how evolution works in modern day life, even with something such as conservation biology. So of course we talk about Darwin in our workshops, and of course we're going to talk about his crazy, amazing impact on the world, but it's important to bring up modern day examples as well. We also try to stress that religious beliefs should make no difference in an evolution unit in a classroom. It never fails to come up in a workshop that teachers ask, well, what do I tell the child who says he's not allowed to believe this, or who simply says he does not believe this? And we always let the teachers share, and it's very important to understand that it doesn't have to be at odds. In a classroom, what you have is science-based evidence. And I show this slide purposely because here you have Professor Richard Dawkins, who's a non-believer, and Dr. Kenneth Miller. He's a professor at Brown University and probably the greatest defender of evolution education we have in our country. And he is a devout Catholic. He goes to church every Sunday. And yet I say, if you were lucky enough to have one of these two gentlemen teaching your evolution unit, there should be no difference in the content, the evidence, the investigations presented. That hopefully will appease some students. We also have a link on our TIES webpage to the common misconceptions, misunderstandings that come with evolution. And hopefully our goal is to reduce the anxiety, the discomfort of students in our classroom. We certainly don't want to challenge them head on or anything like that. Our goal is to make children feel comfortable and to learn in a supportive environment. We also provide teachers with support. If you have a problem in your school teaching evolution, please email me. I'll try to help. I also will point out that the National Science Teachers Association, the National Association for Biology Teachers, and many other very important associations have very good, solid position statements on evolution education. A teacher should not feel alone when confronting parents who challenge them about teaching evolution. They should know that there's plenty of people out there to help. So here is now the actual PowerPoint that you can download from our webpage. It is free for download, and it is also modifiable. It is a PowerPoint document. So feel free to change this any way you need to change it. You could throw your name up on that slide and delete slides, add slides, do what you need to make this your own. So the first thing we're going to present are the evolution standards in a nutshell, which I presented earlier just a bit. First of all, the idea that the theory of evolution is the organizing principle of life science. It's really the underlying theme of the whole science of biology. Secondly, that the scientific theory of evolution is supported by many, many forms of evidence coming from many different areas of science. And finally, at the middle school level, we talk about how natural selection is the primary mechanism leading to change over time in organisms. Of course, if you're using this PowerPoint at a high school level, I suggest you add genetic drift and gene flow and discuss other ways that evolution can occur in a population or change over time. The first thing we talk about in our workshops are bell ringers. Get kids thinking. We could call them icebreakers as well. There's one activity called fact or fiction. We can find this on the TIES webpage. And basically, it is modified from the National Center for Science Education's website. And it's all these myths about evolution. And the students are to take these little myths, we usually cut them into little pieces of paper, and take these little myths and decide if something is a fact or a fiction. It turns out they're all fiction. And it's a very easy way for a teacher to walk around the room and assess what content or what knowledge, prior knowledge, the students are walking into class with. Let's have a look at some teachers trying out this little activity. Take out your little strips and put each comment, each sentence under fact or fiction. Also, everything, I gave you a second copy in there, so don't worry about having to make copies of the little strips of paper. Everything is also online. Everything is online. So as you read each thing, for example, my first one is there are no transitional fossils. You put it under the fact side or the fiction side. Teachers do this in different ways. Some teachers don't cut out the little papers. Some teachers make it a checklist. Are these the I'm not sure?
Yes.
Okay. You're straddling the line. As you can see, it offers me, the educator, a quick assessment of your understanding. A colorful, quick assessment.
Where's the facts?
And as I can see from you, I have a very astute group of students here.
I was gonna.
It depends how you interpret the wording.
Some of them are a little. I've heard that before.
Is that
Now, your answer key is on the next little pile of papers on your left.
Okay, all right, okay.
And the answers and the reasons why they're all myths are there. Although I've had, very good discussions.
They're all myths?
Yep. And you could see the reasons why. For example, the one about birds.
Wait, I don't know if I have the one about birds.
There's no thing about birds.
Oh,
The one about monkeys, though.
There's monkeys, not birds.
where's the monkey one?
Monkeys will
Humans.
eventually become human.
Oh, we all have different things?
Oh, yeah, they're not the same, and mine's worded different.
Yeah, mine says humans evolved from monkeys, so they're not all the same.
Yeah, humans evolved from monkeys.
No, my little green guy says that, but in the answer key, it says.
Oh
monkeys.
yeah, but it's
It's the same idea.
same
though.
idea.
Yeah. That we didn't come from monkeys. We had a common ancestor with them,
Exactly.
right?
Well, the bird one I took out, I guess, because some people had an issue. They said that birds are dinosaurs, and then some people are like, "Well, yeah," and then some people are like, "No, dinosaurs are extinct. Birds are birds, still within reptilia, but
Common ancestors.
common ancestors." So that one was an issue.
Their protein and their feathers relate to the scales of the dinosaurs.
Yeah. So anyway, that one was taken out. But this gives you a quick assessment of your students. It gives you an understanding of where they stand. Now, I've done this in conferences with science teachers, and I get that. I get like a half and half kind of thing. And it kind of gives you an understanding of, where you need to go and how much you need to cover with your students. Another great bell ringer, and this is exactly how I started my evolution unit this year was I brought in a box of this stuff called Advantage. My dog, her name is Jinx, she had fleas, and I spent $68 on this at a pet store. Nothing happened. The fleas did not go away. So then I took my dog to the veterinarian, and the veterinarian, with the wave of a hand, said, "Oh, yeah, that stuff doesn't work anymore." It's like, what do you mean that stuff doesn't work anymore? I just spent $68 on it. I asked the kids, based on your understanding of genetics, why didn't this work anymore? And I wait for them to respond. Hopefully, we're going to get the response that there was a genetic mutation in one of the individuals or several individuals in that population of fleas, which made them resistant to this medicine. Over time, those fleas are successful and pass this trait, this resistance, on to their offspring. And over time, it could take over, this phenotype can take over the entire population. I then put my feet up on my desk and I say, okay, I guess we're done then. You all understand evolution. That's it in a nutshell. Let's move on to ecology or whatever else is on my calendar for the year. And it's a way of getting kids maybe relaxed about learning evolution, realizing that it's just something that happens in day-to-day life, and it isn't something they should be scared of or worried about learning. So we go back to our first standard after my Bellringers, and that's the idea that the scientific theory of evolution is the organizing principle of life science. I like to say evolution explains two things. Evolution explains the common ancestry of all life, how we're all related to each other, and I think this is a beautiful idea, and the idea that the evolution is the reason for the vast diversity, the many millions of species that we see on this planet. It's hard for us all to get an idea of how long we've all been here on this planet and how long things have taken to evolve. So here's the first video here in the bottom right-hand corner. The videos are in purple, called Earth's Timeline. I'm just going to click on that so you can see how easy it is to go to this in your PowerPoint, and it will show a guy, a wonderful gentleman who does a lot of science videos, and he will show you a football field, and he talks about how long it took life to evolve on the planet over time. And you can hear him discussing and explaining the different life forms at different points. And here at the end, he finally gets to the goal line and he gets to where humans are on the planet. So this is our first little video that you can use as NGSS says as a phenomenon, get kids talking about evolution and Earth's timeline and what it means. And then there's this wonderful site called Nova Evolution Labs. I'm going to go ahead and click on that and show you how to get there. You're going to get to this webpage. And I think as you're starting to see that this PowerPoint should not be used as a lecture. And I really, really stress that. There are notes under every slide. This PowerPoint should serve teachers as a guide to get through all of the standards that they need to cover, but stopping and playing online games, trying out investigations, and letting the students do different things to come to the knowledge on their own. But the cool thing about the PowerPoint is that it's all in one place. You don't have to go looking for resources, different websites, different books, etc. It's all together in one place. And if you cover the PowerPoint with all the stops and starts, allowing for children's active learning, you will be covering all of your evolution standards. So let's go ahead and play this game. This game really shows the concept of common ancestry and diversity. So you click play game. I tell my students to go in with a guest pass. However, if you do this over more than one day, they will lose their progress. So some of my students started signing in with Google so they wouldn't lose their progress. There are, first of all, two of the most beautiful videos I've ever seen about evolution on this site. Here's one of them. I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. And then you go to play mission 1, training trees, right here. And here's the second amazing video that comes with this presentation. The colors, everything, it's just beautiful. It covers that it is not a ladder of progress evolution, but rather a tree. Let's try one of the games. So you notice here in the center, it's somewhat of a black square. And you can go ahead and relate the two living things together, tie them together. You can see that you could put them in any order. Then you take this derived character, this trait, and you decide where should it go on the tree. Are only palm trees possessing cells with nuclei? Or perhaps maybe only the gecko? Or maybe, if both species share this trait, it should go before the split point. Good job. Next. Every once in a while, students are not going to be able to move these guys anywhere, you see? And what it means is that you have to hit this magnifying glass here and learn about one of the organisms on the screen. Now, you know where most of your students are going to put the mushroom. There? No. Probably there. They look at a mushroom, they think it's more plant-like. But then the problem is you come over here and you put heterotroph under the lizard because, yes, it cannot make its own food. And you put photosynthetic autotroph, making food using the energy of the sunlight. And the students realize that, the mushroom is not a photosynthetic autotroph. And eventually they will get it right and they'll bring it over here. So they find out that the fungus is more closely related to the animal. They submit next, and they go to their next tree. And it goes on and on like that. There's hundreds of missions. I shouldn't say hundreds, excuse me. I should say more than a dozen. And I promise you, this lesson, I mean, I could literally walk out of my classroom and go get a cup of coffee and come back. They wouldn't notice I was gone. Of course, I would never actually do that, for the record, but they really, really love that activity. So that really covers some of the idea of the common ancestry and diversity of life. And it also starts to fight against that misconception that it's a ladder of progress, but rather it's more like a tree. Another wonderful site is this site here. I'm going to go ahead and click on it so you can see it. Evaginao.com. And they have an interactive tree of life over here. So students, first of all, look how colorful and beautiful this is. I mean, it's very visually appealing. So you come on over here to your interactive tree of life, and you can pick on different things, and it will bring it up and show you different things. Students can learn about reptiles, for example, and move around the tree like so. Reset. And it really helps them understand that everything that's made it to the top of this semicircle is still around today. And these branches, these little twigs even, that didn't make it to the top of the semicircle are examples of extinctions. And it also shows where humans are over here all the way to the right. Another wonderful website that your students can explore. Of course, I did mention that I like to promote modern day examples of evolution, but it is important to talk about the amazing impact this man has had, Charles Darwin. If you click on who was Charles Darwin, you're going to come up with a lovely reenactment by PBS about who was Charles Darwin. It shows it shows a little video of who he was, etc. You can see him in there. And so that's a wonderful one also called Who Was Charles Darwin? Again, it's right there on the slide. All you have to do is go to it. You don't want to go to it, you skip it. That's the beautiful thing about this PowerPoint. You could really make it your own. Now, this hypothesis stuff, hypothesis versus theory stuff. You know how difficult it is for students to explain this. So right here on this slide, I have an explanation of hypothesis, law, and theory. Of course, you will have to put up with those ads. which I can now skip. And this is a wonderful, very catchy video explaining the difference between theory, law, and hypothesis. He does a great job. It's very colorful. It's got some sense of humor in it. So again, it's a really good stop to go over the difference between these terms in biology and science in general. Standard 2, evidence for evolution. Funnily enough, I did this today in my own classroom, and I asked students to come up with the different evidences, types of evidence for evolution, and then see how many they could come up with. Well, I got to be honest with you, they didn't come up with too many. Of course, they gave me fossils. Did not get that one. Did not get that one either. I did get number 7 because they did just do genetics with me. So what the PowerPoint is going to do now is go through the different evidence, types of evidence for evolution. And if I can just step out a second and show you my notes, as you can see below every slide, you have ideas of how to divide students into groups, how to get them learning on their own. Here's how to make casts and molds. It's a wonderful lesson plan from the National Park Service. So if you check, once you download this PowerPoint, if you look under the slides, for example, that one, you can see how there are many different ways to incorporate this and get the kids learning on their own. The other thing I do here is I don't make them copy all of that. As you can see, these are some text-heavy slides coming up. I have a student read the definition of, say, body fossil, and then I have the students make decide on a summarized way of saying this. In my class, the summary for body fossil was a fossil that is the actual body of the organism, and I went with that. Okay, that was a pretty good one. So fossil mold. What my students wrote down for this one is imprint. We came up with some examples like footsteps, leaves left behind in the mud, which then the organic material part of the leaf disappears and the imprint is left in the hardened mud and sediment. There is in the notes section of the PowerPoint a wonderful activity where students make molds using anything they want, really. They could use quarters and dimes and pennies and shells and anything that you provide them or they bring into class. And they have to learn the difference between the fossil mold and the fossil cast. This is a bit difficult for them. We do discuss, for example, the cast on your arm, but the cast is the negative of the mold. So in the activity that is provided in the notes, you will see that first they make the mold by pushing into Play-Doh or into clay something like a coin or a shell. And then they can fill that imprint with the cast. So it's the opposite of the mold. It's the cast fossil, which is filled in by minerals and sediment, etc. And it looks like the animal itself. And here you have a beautiful example of a trilobite. Amber, they called it just a tree sap in my class. We talked about Jurassic Park and how we really cannot extract DNA from organisms that lived that long ago. And this brought in a nice conversation in the classroom. Petrified wood. Some of the students talked about how it's used to make jewelry. Some of the students had been to Yellowstone and seen examples of this. So again, we read through this definition and then came up with a 3 to 4 word definition that they could actually write down in their notes. I've linked to the National Center for Science Education here because fossils are something kids really like. A lot of kids are curious about this and want to keep learning. So I left this in here in case the kids want to explore further and you want to give them access to computers and so forth. They can go to this page and learn a lot more about fossils. Biogeography is a tough one. They have a hard time understanding this one. So we discussed these examples and then I said, look, Darwin, he went to South America and there was the fossil of the giant sloth. Where do we find the modern day sloth? In South America. It wouldn't make sense if the fossil of the giant sloth was, say, in China and the modern day sloth lived in South America. He put two and two together and realized that it's not a coincidence that modern day sloths or armadillos are only found naturally in the same place where their fossils are found naturally. The law of superposition. I don't know about you, but in my state, earth science has really lost its stature in our curriculum guides, which is a shame. And so a lot of the children, even by middle school, do not know what the law of superposition is. This is a great moment to stop and describe again the difference between a law and a theory. Laws describe, theories explain, and how laws can inform our theories or explanations about natural phenomena. I like to show them this picture and simply say that the oldest rock, which is the lowest, contains the oldest organisms. And you can say first in the lowest rock, you have the thing with the head. Next, the thing with the head and the feet, followed by the thing with the head, the feet, and the fur, followed by the thing with the head, the feet, the fur, the opposable thumb, and the big brain. So this is a nice little cartoon that helps them understand that. They can draw that for you. They can see that the lower rock has the oldest rock has the oldest organisms. And what's interesting, and I love to stress, is that we've never found the fossil in the wrong place. And the famous biologist, J.B.S. Haldane, said when they asked him, what would make you change your mind about evolution? He said, find me a rabbit fossil in Precambrian rock. It's never been done. And this is another great place to stress that scientists will change their minds if evidence comes that contradicts what their ideas are, their theories are at any point in time. You have to be open-minded as a scientist, but as of yet, we haven't found any evidence against the idea, the law of superposition, the older fossils being in the older rock, and nothing else. So that's a funny little quote for you there. Artificial selection. Darwin spent a lot of time talking about this in The Origin of Species. I mean, just look around and you can see that if we've done it, well, surely nature could do it. If we have carved out desirable characteristics in things like pigs and cows and dogs and cats and vegetables, well, certainly nature can do the same thing. My favorite example here, and the favorite example of many of our students, is artificial selection is dogs. The fact that all dogs have evolved or come from the great wolf. My dog thinks she's a wolf. That is pretty clear the way she acts around the house. Now, here is something really amazing. This Nova documentary called Dogs Decoded takes a look at a modern day experiment that took place in Russia on artificial selection. So, all you have to do is Google Nova's Dog Decoded. It's up on Vimeo right now. It's minute 36, actually, not so much 35. And it talks about an experiment in Siberia that started in the 1950s where they took fur trade foxes and they took a few and bred the tamest foxes together. And of course, at the beginning, they weren't exactly tame. They were just less fearful than their siblings. They kept taking every generation the least fearful baby foxes, fox pups, and breeding them together. Within 8 generations, they saw baby foxes being born. They couldn't even open their eyes yet, and yet they were seeking out the comfort of the humans in the room. And this experiment has been going on now for over 50 years. They basically have bred a dog. Along with tameness, other traits have been carried along with the tameness trait. For example, floppy ears, floppy tail, it wags its tail, they lick your face like a dog would lick. And it's a great it's a great example to show how dogs may have evolved from wolves. Another important evidence for evolution, and a really compelling one, I think, is vestigial structures. Students here, I believe, after reading this definition, features that were adaptations for an organism's ancestor, but have evolved to no longer perform their original function due to a change in the organism's environment. I think my students said, stuff in our bodies we don't use anymore. That was the definition that they wrote. And they really love this video on vestigial organs in humans that talks about evolution's not just out there in the world. Evolution is also being carried in our own bodies. And we can see it in our wisdom teeth. We can see it in goosebumps. We can see it in the fact that we can still move our ears, although it doesn't really help us very much. And covers a wide range of video. This is goosebumps here. It covers a wide range of vestigial structures that we still find in humans today. This part here, my students were a little surprised at the fact that in some cases, little children can be born with tails. And it does show a photograph of a little baby born with a tail. Of course, they wanted to all know if it could be surgically removed at this point, and so forth. I think coming up here, you're going to see a little baby human. As you can see, during fetal development, we originally have tails, and then we lose it over time, but the blueprint is still there, and there it is. It's very interesting for students to see that. Go back to my PowerPoint. And this link down here, how did whales evolve, is an activity that they can play in your classroom that shows you how whales evolve. I'll just click on it real quick. And of course, you don't have to show all of these in your classroom, but you can if you want to, and you can assign different activities and videos and so forth. Comparative anatomy. Our forearms. Nature, evolution does not invent new structures. In many cases, it simply retools structures that are already present. So our forelimb, much like the forelimb of a cat and the flipper on a whale, the wing on a bat, you have the same pattern. Long bone, two long bones, bits of bones, some more long bones, some more bits of bones. And every tetrapod on Earth has this pattern, which is really an indication of common ancestry. Your Inner Fish by Dr. Neil Shubin is a 3-hour series online, and also a just fantastic book I highly recommend, which covers the fact that we share this amazing common ancestry with so many living things around us. Comparative embryology is another example of that. Here's a more true-to-life photograph. And now you're going to see some teachers trying out an activity that is found in the notes section of this particular slide. The answer key to the activity can also be found under this particular slide. So let's have a look. And finally, the latest overwhelming evidence for evolution in biology comes from molecular biology. Genes are, in a sense, homologous structures. It's pretty amazing. I think I read a quote that said that you could throw out the other 6 types of evidence for evolution. This one is so overwhelming and compelling that it's really all we need. The rest is icing on the cake at this point. But still, fossils are fun, so I think you should try that out first. Just in case you have not covered genetics before evolution, here you have some important vocabulary that you could go over with your students before you begin. I also have explanations on what is a gene and a video here that will take you into what DNA looks like in case they need to understand. They have yet to learn the structure of DNA, etc. If you have already done genetics and you want to skip these slides, like I said, it's your PowerPoint. Go ahead and delete these slides. Just in case they haven't gone over this stuff yet. There's your DNA and what it does. And how our DNA compares to those of other species. I'll check on this link here. And this is a interesting video of, again, we have our ads. You know, the students love the ads. Of University of Nebraska has a very nice, the State Museum at the University of Nebraska has a wonderful museum on evolution. And one of the things that they have is a human and chimp comparison of our nucleotide sequences. So as you can see here, I think he's going to point, yes, there. You can see how similar the nucleotide sequences are between the human and the chimp. And you could run down a line and see all of the differences, and finally he'll run into a difference. I see all the similarities, and finally he'll run into a difference every once in a while. So there's one way that we can see genes as homologous structures. Hox genes are organizational genes in your body, and you can see that it goes way back in our ancestors because fruit flies have similar organizational genes as we do, as humans do. More examples of how genetics has informed evolutionary biology. I highly recommend, if you're not going to show all the videos, I highly recommend this one by Dr. Kenneth Miller, who's going to explain something pretty amazing here. The fact that apes, all the other apes, have 48 chromosomes in their cells, and humans have 46. And anybody who has a small understanding, a limited understanding of genetics, would know that the loss of an entire chromosome, especially a relatively large chromosome, would result in the death of the species. So how is it that we have we're missing an entire chromosome? There's the haploid number in the chimpanzee, the orangutan, and the gorilla is 24, and yet the haploid number in humans is 23. Did we actually lose a chromosome somewhere in our lineage? The answer is no, and he's going to explain that here. He's going to explain that 2 of our chromosomes fused together. And we know this because chromosomes have distinctive parts, telomeres on the end, centromeres in the middle. And our chromosome number 2 actually has telomeres in the middle and a deactivated centromere, a second deactivated centromere. And so our chromosome number 2 is actually corresponding to 2 of the chimpanzee or the other ape chromosomes. So we did not lose a chromosome, it's simply fused together. Now that's a wonderful hypothesis that you can use as an example. Here's an example of how scientists took a hypothesis and tested it and found out the answer. And this is the same one about comparing human and chimp DNA that I just showed you earlier at the University of Nebraska State Museum. And finally, we get to standard 3, and that is that natural selection is a primary mechanism leading to change over time in organisms. So we can look at a couple of videos for you here. This video is fascinating, and it's some professors, some biologists who took at Harvard Medical School, who took a giant Petri dish, and they divided it up and put different amounts of antibiotics, as you can see here, 0 antibiotics on the end zones, and 1,000 times the amount of antibiotics you'd need to kill this particular type of bacteria in the center. And what they show is how the bacteria over time make it, after 11 days, I believe, to the center due to the accumulation of random mutations over time. Makes you think, what did they do with the bacteria that made it to the center of this giant Petri dish? I hope they got rid of them in a very convincing fashion. And the other video is a stated clearly video. These videos are wonderful. He states things clearly. A beautiful artwork in these videos, and it explains to children what is natural selection. Seems to be loading slowly, but if you have had any experience with these stated clearly videos, they're really wonderful. What must be met? Conditions that must be met for natural selection to occur. The best and easiest explanation I have encountered is presented by Dr. Jay Hostler. He writes a series of graphic novels on evolution and other parts of biology. I really recommend them for your students. There's the little picture at the top of his book on evolution. So first of all, traits in a population must exhibit variation. I always say, look around, guys, look around the classroom. We're all members of the same species, and yet look at the variation in this tiny sample size of human beings. Secondly, it's important that not all individuals survive to reproduce. I went back to, as Dr. Kenneth Miller says in one of his lectures, he went back to his high school reunion and some of his classmates had 5 children and some had no children at all. In the case of nature and how it works in nature, that survival is not random. The survivors had some sort of advantage over those that didn't survive. And this gives them an adaptive advantage. And finally, whatever adaptive advantage this is, it must be heritable. It means, and then of course, it's very important to explain the word fitness to your students. It's one of those words like organic, like the word theory, that can mean different things. You know, I do jumping jacks in front of my students and I say, okay, this is not the fitness I'm talking about. Fitness means your ability to reproduce successfully, your ability to have offspring. I know some of your students are more visual learners, so I've also included a flow chart in this PowerPoint. And then it's time for them to play a game. You have to have Adobe Flash for this, which I do. And in my classroom, this was not a problem. I know in some cases it can be. And what you have to do here is choose a population of these funny looking guys. I don't even know what I would call them. I don't even know what phylum they would fall in. I guess they're chordata. They definitely have some sort of backbone going on, but I don't really know much after that. Mammals, I guess? What your students have to do is choose a starter population. Hopefully they listen to you when you told them that you have to have variation in a population and they don't pick 3 of the exact same guys. Because if they do, this is what's going to happen. Oh yes, you can choose the genetic mutation, although random, can be chosen in this game. And as you can see, my population has survived 138,000 years. I hope my little guys are tall enough to reach it. Uh-oh, what's that? I'm surprised I've survived this long without variation. Oh, so I didn't make it, and your students keep trying. That's a fun game. And in my opinion, this little video here is the best, simple, and excellent explanation of natural selection I've ever seen. So you start with a population of these little rock-like creatures. They make babies by just knocking into each other. Here comes his partner. And then you see what kind of pressures are on this environment. So there's your variation in the population. And uh-oh, here comes the predator. And he starts picking off some of the little rock creatures, I guess we can call them. Boom. And as you can see, over time, they become more and more like the environment around them. What I love about this video too is it talks about adaptation and that individuals don't adapt, the population adapts. And the other thing it shows is that just because this phenotype is good for surviving right now, doesn't mean it's always going to be good for surviving. There's a mutation that made the little rocks green, and lo and behold, the environment changes, and it looks like, no, the little rock is about to be eaten. Is he going to pick the green one? No, he picks the one that used to be a very favorable phenotype. So that's another wonderful video you can show. I've been skipping some of the active learning ideas because I encourage you to go ahead and look in the notes of this PowerPoint and find them on your own. 2 more videos here. Strep throat, and what's the deal with antibiotics? What's the deal with modern day bacteria unfortunately, developing a resistance to our antibiotics? I really recommend the Amoeba Sisters. They're wonderful videos. Funny, creative, and very simple and clear. If you want to continue to address misconceptions, this is an amusing link to some of the most common myths or misunderstandings about evolution. And you also have here a giraffe dissection, which shows how there are many errors in our bodies. Our bodies are not necessarily perfect. And it shows how there is a nerve that goes from your brain to your vocal cord, one on each side. On one side, it goes directly from brain to vocal cord. On the other side, the nerve goes down around the aorta of the heart and back up to your neck and to your vocal cords. Circuitous path. Doesn't make any sense unless you look at it in light of evolution. Then suddenly it does make sense. I encourage you to check out that giraffe dissection. I do warn you it's graphic, so I don't really want to show it to you. And so it might be difficult for some students because you do see a large dead giraffe being dissected on a table. And finally, excuse me, I think it's time to go to the TIES website and check out some of the other online lessons, videos, etc. that you can use. So here's our webpage. Gives you a little background about TIES, first of all. And please, if you can donate and support us, that would be great. We have t-shirts here at the shop and a way to donate here directly on the page. We do have a Facebook and a Twitter account that you can follow. We post pretty much only educational resources on there. We have labs being done in class by a teacher. This is one of our signature labs. It's all about data connection, etc. And you can watch a teacher doing it with her students. The teacher is me, by the way. And so if you've never tried this lab before, you can try it out and follow along. I warn you that I purposely made the video very low tech, and I didn't let the children practice beforehand. It's just exactly what you would expect would happen in a classroom. The young lady with the long hair starts cheating. We have to start over, etc. So it's exactly what you would expect in a classroom. Yeah, I'm going to stop that and go back to my website. There is another lab that we promote, and here is also me doing another lab with those same students that you can see. Then how did we organize our teacher materials? We organize them by standard. So first here, the Ready to Go Evolution unit. This is all you need from start to finish if you wanted to cover your evolution standards. But in case you want to go further, try different things, we have general online resources for evolution, addressing fact, hypothesis, law, and theory, addressing misconceptions, things that games and so forth, which will help your students understand life's common ancestry and diversity. Some a lesson on a timeline activity that's a tattoo that students can put on their arms with eyeliner or something like that. And it's basically Earth's entire history. And humans, of course, if you start up at the armpit and the shoulder, humans show up very much near the nail, the tip of the nail of their middle finger. So they just show all of life's history on their arm. If you want to go into some history, there's who was Charles Darwin, some of the crazy things that we find in our own bodies and in the bodies of other living things that show that evolution is definitely not perfect, just good enough. We have hands-on investigations on natural selection, online games on natural selection, videos on natural selection. And then we have all these different sites for evidence for evolution. If you'd like to help us teach other teachers and maybe run one of our workshops, we provide you with all of the materials. And this is where you would click to join the TIES Teacher Corps. As I said earlier, we're over 64 teachers nationwide at this point. Here you can send me your lessons that you think are great and you think it would be very helpful for other teachers, and I would add them here to this list. So many of these, I didn't find them myself, of course. Many of these were sent to me by other teachers. Here's our map, and here is our schedule to see if you have a workshop taking place near you. And once a month or so, we try to host a scientist or author who does a webinar for us. Here are the recordings of the previous webinars. For example, a webinar on the evolution of human skin color, a webinar on evolution misconceptions, and different people they're very worthwhile, and the recordings are right there. I would love to hear from you. I'm open to ideas. I could use all the help I can get. This is a teacher-run project. All of our presenters are classroom teachers, and we would love for you to join us if you think this is something that you would like to do in your own local school district. I hope you learned some stuff today. I hope you picked up some good resources today, and have fun in that classroom. Good night.